I think people are still coming in. It's summer in the city, August 2nd, 2002, Committee of the Whole.
2023.
2023, thank you. And I'll call the meeting to order, and we have really two very important and interesting information items, both on housing and transit safety. But that's, I assume the agenda is approved. But first we have the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting on June 21st, 2023. Is there any corrections or additions to that agenda? And if not, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve.
Second.
Thank you, thank you. Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. We're starting the annual Public Housing Agency Plan, and Terri Smith, Stephanie Paulson are joining us. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
Terri and Stephanie.
Is this on? Hello.
It is.
Good afternoon. Council members, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Terri Smith and I'm the Director of the Council's Housing and Redevelopment Authority. I'm happy to be with you today with my colleague and friend Stephanie Paulson, who is the Assistant Director for the Metro HRA here at the Council. We're here today to provide you with an overview of the Metro HRA's housing policy agency plan process. This presentation will set the stage for a public hearing that will occur on August 18th. Before the Community Development Committee, and a deeper policy discussion with the Community Development Committee on September 5th. Those will be followed by a formal action item later in September by the CDC and then the Council for final approval of the annual Public Housing Agency Plan. So as some background, the Metro HRA provides rent assistance to over 7,200 households in the region, primarily through the Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is commonly known as Section 8. Although the Council provides many services throughout the entire region, this map here represents the Metro HRA service area. So the HRA service area was set through state legislation, and we serve all of Anoka County, all of Carver County, and then suburban Hennepin and Ramsey counties here. Essentially, the Metro HRA was developed as part of the Council to serve the parts of the region with Section 8 that are not served by another housing authority, such as Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the other agencies you see here on this map. So we serve rent assistance to about 96 communities in the region. We distributed in 2022 $78 million in rental subsidy payments to about 1,400 landlords throughout the region. So the Public Housing Agency Plan is a requirement for the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for any agency that's administering a Housing Choice Voucher Program. The plan describes HRA program goals, strategies, and goals for meeting the needs of low-income residents in the region. There's also a 5-year component to the plan, which is due every 5th year. So the current 5-year plan was approved for the period of 2020 to 2024. So next year we will be engaging with you all on the 2025 5-year plan, which is more of a long-range planning document for the Housing Authority activities. The subject of today's discussion and the future discussions that'll be the remainder of this month and into next month are regarding the annual plan. This is a document that's due to HUD each year in October of each year and requires a bunch of components, but identifying the housing goals and needs for meeting the needs of the low-income people within the region in the coming year. The Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan, which is this hefty document right here, is required as a supporting document to the Public Housing Agency Plan. It's really the main policy document for the Housing Authority business. So it informs staff. It's the document, although they all now have it electronically, that you'll find on every HRA staff member's desk that guides day-to-day program operations. It contains things like when we will change somebody's rent, how we calculate rent, how we set rent limits, how people can request changes in household members. And it includes things like project-based voucher policies that you've been hearing about most recently in one of the chapters in here. But it's very significant, and we make minor revisions to this document every year, and some years are more substantial than others. But this document is currently posted for public review along with the Public Housing Agency plan for public comment. So what is a project-based voucher? I believe most of you, if not all of you, have been contacted by a developer about the Metro HRA's project-based voucher program over the last year or two. Which is the reason we're here at the Committee of the Whole instead of generally bringing our business to the Community Development Committee. But the majority of the vouchers operated by the Metro HRA are tenant-based, meaning they are attached to a tenant. They move from place to place with the resident, where the resident chooses where they want to live, renting from a private landlord that's willing to participate in the program. That's the choice component of the housing choice voucher, where the resident chooses where to live. When a voucher is project-based, the housing assistance is tied to a specific unit rather than to a tenant. So a tenant moves in, they're receiving housing assistance while they're living in that unit, and remains a permanent housing unit with continued rent assistance in that given unit. There are really certain benefits to both sides of it, project-basing and tenant-based, but in short, tenant-based, I would say the biggest benefit is that the resident has choice in where they live, thus the choice. On the project-based side of the equation, we're going to dig deeper into this on September 5th with the CDC committee. But essentially, it's providing hard units in buildings for low-income renters that are more permanent in nature. Back in 2020, we made some changes to the administrative plan. As I indicated, pretty much every year we make changes to the plan, but they're really for clarity purposes. We're making changes to come in line with changing federal regulations, with changes in HUD guidance, or policy changes that you are all adopting each year. But back in 2020, with your approval, we made some policy changes in the project-based voucher chapter, which is chapter 17 in this document. At that time, there was language added to the document to provide clarity on when and how the Metro HRA will offer project-based vouchers. It included things that we consider when we're determining whether or not to issue or offer project-based vouchers in a given year. And those include things like current voucher utilization for the entire program as a whole. We look at current voucher turnover rates, and I'll get into that in one of the future slides. We look at funding and budget. So what does our budget look like for this coming year? We look at other work plan items. What other things do we have on our priority list as work plan items? And then we're looking at balancing project-based voucher admissions along with regular waiting list admissions to the program. There was a statement added to the plan to make clear that there's no guarantee that the Housing Authority will offer and award project-based vouchers every single year, that it's a year-by-year determination. There were revisions made in the scoring criteria back in 2020, which really provided priority for projects that have supportive service components to them, for people, for example, living in units that have services to provide services for people experiencing homelessness or people living with disabilities. So that became the highest scoring component effective 2020. And then the last change that was made in 2020 was to prioritize project-based voucher placement in our own service area prior to awarding outside of the Metro HRA service area. At that time and in recent years, project-based vouchers have become more in demand. We're the only housing authority in the state that has ever authorized project-based vouchers outside of our service area. So we're more coming in line with what other housing authorities are doing and bringing us back to why the legislation adopted the service area for the Metro HRA to serve areas that are not served by another housing authority. The policy for project basing remains that the council will project base up to 20% of its vouchers as project basing. That was not a change in 2020, but that policy remained in place at that time. That 20% policy has been in place for several years. In terms of project-based vouchers, this is a summary and sort of a current state of where we're at right now with project-based vouchers, but housing authorities through HUD regulation are allowed to project-base up to 20% of their vouchers, and that's historically. In recent years, through the Housing Authorization through Modernization Act, HUD added that housing authorities can add an additional 10% for certain developments that are have supportive service components, serving people with disabilities, serving veterans, or in low poverty areas. So poverty areas with less than 20% poverty. And so now really the total is a max of 30% project-based for housing authorities across the country. Again, the current policy for the council is up to 20% PVV. This gets a little bit confusing, but although the Metro HRA has 7,257 vouchers, only 6,839 have an option for project basing. And I have a chart on the next slide that will illustrate this, but there are some programs that don't have a project basing option. So this pie chart at the right, the darker blue or the royal blue area, includes all tenant-based vouchers that we administer today, and that's based on the total number of vouchers that we have. The other two pieces of pie are representing the current state of project-based vouchers. So we currently have 975 vouchers that are dedicated to specific units through project basing. And if we were to go up to the 20% max today, we could project base an additional 392 vouchers. If we were going to adopt an additional 10% on top of that, instead of project basing an additional 392 vouchers, we could project base an additional 683. But again, you have not made that policy decision. Staff is not recommending that policy decision today, and we'll talk more about that on September 5th. But our current state is we're at 975 project-based vouchers, about 14% of our voucher allocation. So this chart here shows some special purpose vouchers, and by special purpose vouchers, these are vouchers that are awarded by HUD to serve certain populations, so they have separate funding sources and they're required to serve certain populations. So the emergency housing vouchers, the Housing Authority was awarded 218 of those during COVID to serve people experiencing homelessness and get them connected to housing stability. There is not an option to project base those, so that's regulatory. The mainstream vouchers we've had in place since 2018. We have 253 of them. These are serving people that are homeless or at risk of homelessness, in aging out or transitioning out of institutions. And this is where we have a partnership with our friends at Metro Transit Homeless Action Team. Thank you, Bev. Sergeant Rodriguez. And so getting people that are experiencing housing instability and utilizing the transit system as shelter. And so we have 253 of those. There is a project basing component to that, which I'll talk about in a minute. We have a Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing Program. This is a program that we partner with the Department of Veterans Affairs. The VA provides services, the Housing Authority provides the housing assistance, and they come with supportive services. We have 210 of those, and there is also a project-based component to those. We have currently 20 Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing Vouchers, we call them VASH, that have been project-based since 2015 and in a development at Fort Snelling. It's been a very successful development that remains full, and the veterans have become stabilized there. We have a family unification program that is relatively small. It's a partnership with the Anoka County Child Protection System. We only have 46 of those vouchers, and they're all in use, and we have the ability to project base those, but we haven't to date. And then we have a non-elderly disabled program which provides voucher rent assistance to people who are disabled in ages 18 through 61, and those do not have the ability to be project-based. In 2023, the Metro HRA offered and tentatively awarded 20 VASH project-based vouchers and 20 mainstream vouchers. And we issued an RFP earlier this year, and we offer a tentative award to developers that applied for those. And one of the requirements in the administrative plan that has been approved by you all, and that was in the RFP, is that the developers receive their full financing in this calendar year in order to get a formal award. So if the developers that got the preliminary awards for those Beacon Interfaith got 10 of those if they get their financing through Minnesota Housing. In most cases, they're applying for tax credits at the same time. If they get their tax credits, we'll come back to you all for formal approval to award these vouchers. If they don't get their funding, these 40 that we offered will go back into the tenant-based pool.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
just a couple of real quick questions on this. So on the asterisk, the mainstream and the bash that you just mentioned, are those numbers reflected then on the grid? Is that the 20 that were awarded in 23 tentatively, and of the 40 on the grid, is that 20 of those awarded? Is that the total number with the tentatives included?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Johnson, no, they are not, because you have not formally approved them. They were just given tentative award,
Okay.
pending funding.
Okay, that's great. Just wanted that clarification so I knew. And then you had mentioned that on the family unification program, we're using all of those vouchers. Of the other categories, are they all in use too, or is that coming up later in the presentation? Or I'm just curious, of that breakup.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, thank you for that question. We're getting close. Mainstream, we're very near full, having them all utilized. Do you want to take this question, boss?
Sure. Chair and council members, the most recent numbers that I looked at today were at 89% utilized for emergency housing vouchers, with 41 formally issued and maybe a dozen or so that are in the process of being issued. That's emergency housing vouchers. And mainstream vouchers were just around 95% fully utilized. With searching vouchers out, their voucher success rates are slightly lower than regular housing choice, but anticipating that it would be fully utilized. Both programs will be fully utilized within the next 30 days, 60 days, which is great.
And again, that means they're in the hand of somebody. They've either got a place to live, or they're in their time frame of they're looking, so they're actively in the hands of somebody, so to speak.
Chair and Councilmember Johnson, so when we say utilize, that means we're actively paying housing assistance on a unit. When we say searchers, that means they have a voucher and they're currently looking for a place.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Johnson, I might add one thing to that. The emergency vouchers, you may recall from previous discussions, those are the only vouchers we've ever received that sunset. So if they're not in use by September 30th, 2023, we lose those vouchers. Folks that still have those vouchers and are using them, they can keep them as long as they need them. But as they turn over, we can't reissue them, they go back. And that's the first type of voucher we've ever received of that kind. I think because they were issued during the period of pandemic to help people experiencing homeless obtain stable housing through COVID. But from a national perspective, is the national placement rate like 70% on those, Stephanie?
Emergency housing around 80%.
80%. So we're above the national average.
And Mr. Chair, just to clarify, and where are we at, Terri? How many of those vouchers don't have aren't placed or aren't being utilized or in searching process? How many are at risk, I guess I'm saying, this September of losing them?
We're hoping none.
Okay.
So we've received a lot of referrals. In fact, Mr. Chair, sorry about that, Councilmember Johnson, in fact, we thought about reaching out to the feds to see if other housing authorities have turned them back, because we know from a national perspective they're not all in use, to see if we could get some more, because we could get a few more referrals and try to get more issued by that time period. So,
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair.
okay, thank you. So next slide. So some of the things to consider as we're thinking about project-based vouchers is that HUD does not provide new vouchers for project basing. So they come out of the same pool of 7,200 vouchers. So if we're project basing more, we're taking away from the tenant-based pool. If we're tenant basing more, they're not going into the project basing pool. And they come out of a limited supply of turnover vouchers that serve many purposes. So on an average, and I have a more detailed slide on this next, but on average we have over the last 3 years, we've had an average of 532 vouchers in a year's time that have turned over. And those 532 vouchers have to serve all of these purposes. So we're serving people that are on a waiting list. You may recall we opened our waiting list in 2021. We received 11,000 applications in a week. From that, we put 2,000 folks on the waiting list. 1,800 remain. So we're a year and some later, and we have 1,800 remaining on that list. Turnover vouchers serve that population. We have some waiting list preferences that you've all adopted in this policy document. For example, we have a Homework Starts with Home program. And that's a partnership with Suburban Ramsey County Schools to provide vouchers to students and their families that are experiencing homelessness so they can achieve housing stability and remain in the same school. We have 40 vouchers committed to what's called a move up preference. And that's where we commit vouchers to people, individuals that are living in permanent supportive housing in the region. They no longer need the supports, so we give them a voucher, thereby opening a permanent supportive housing unit for somebody that needs the support. So they're going to populations that maybe are at risk of homelessness or indirectly impacting that population. We're using the turnover vouchers to initially fill project-based voucher units. So as a project-based development comes on, they complete construction, we have to fill those units. I'll give you an example. We awarded 50 project-based vouchers to Beacon Interfaith in 2020 for a Vista 44 development. That project is just breaking ground, under construction. When they open in about a year, we'll have to take 50 turnover vouchers and use them to fill that building initially. When a project-based voucher resident lives in a unit, in a project-based unit for 12 months, they then have the ability to request a tenant-based voucher. So after they live there 12 months, they can call us and say, Stephanie, I'd like one of those vouchers because I want to move to Hopkins or whatever. And the regs require us to issue those vouchers to project-based movers before we can serve the waiting list. So they serve that purpose. And the last purpose they serve is absorbing vouchers from other housing authorities. And I know that's housing authority lingo, but that's what we call it. When someone has a voucher, they can move wherever they want with that voucher. Minneapolis has their own program. If someone gets a voucher from Minneapolis, they move to our service area, so they move to Maplewood. When they get here, we can absorb them into our own program, uses up one of our vouchers, taking a turnover voucher, or we can bill Minneapolis. We don't want to absorb because we don't want to use our turnover vouchers for that, but we have to. Like right now we have 900 port-ins, vouchers that we're billing for, and that's an administrative nightmare for our team and takes a lot of capacity. So we have to absorb some of those to relieve the administrative burden of billing. So these are the purposes that these turnover vouchers serve. So as I indicated, our current policy in the administrative plan is that we will project base up to 20% of our vouchers. We have 392 remaining before we reach 20%. I want to be clear that those 392 vouchers are not sitting on a shelf somewhere, they're all in use. It's just as they turn over, they would be switched from the tenant-based pot to the project-based pot. We've had policy requests, as many, if not all of you have had, from a developer that wants us, or you all, to adopt a policy of project basing 30% of our vouchers. And I know this is small print here, but I thought it was important for a transparency, reason and for look back reasons to put all these points in here. But it's not a realistic goal to reach 20% project-based vouchers in the next few years unless we or you all as policymakers are ready to commit most turnover vouchers to project basing, so to specific units. Staff capacity is an issue with project basing. If we were going to say tomorrow we want to get up to 30%, we wouldn't have the team to do it. We have so many things on our work plan, things that you know of, but some are landlord and resident engagement. We're exploring home ownership program. We're exploring and getting ready for the statewide rent assistance through the legislation that was just passed. We're applying for new federal funding as it becomes available. In fact, today we got 26, which is really great, new vouchers from the feds, just out of the blue, which is really great, but it takes staff to get those vouchers issued and get those vouchers placed. And we're trying to expand resident engagement efforts around wealth building and empowerment strategies, which Stephanie will talk about in a little bit. We have housing stability initiatives. Tenant supports are heavier than they've ever been in our program administration, so we're trying to do more with supporting tenants. So these are all work plan items, and I only give you these examples so you understand that things have to give. If we're going to do more of this, we have to do less of this. And then one other point that I'll make on the project-based vouchers is once we get to the max, whether that's 20% or 30%, we're done. You don't have that resource or that as a tool going forward. So once we hit those percentages, we hit the max.
Mr. Chair, just a real quick clarification again. So the developer that I think we are talking about is asking that 30% be designated to 30% AMI. I just want to know, are the current project-based vouchers that we have limited to 30% AMI?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, not explicitly. So the project-based voucher program can serve people up to 50% AMI, and that's federal regulation. Some of the developments that we have may have targets for 30% units because of other financing commitments that they have. So technically, folks can live in project-based units that are 50% AMI. But inherently and naturally, about 70% of who we serve are at that 30% AMI or lower because the people we're serving have extremely low incomes.
And Mr. Chair, just to clarify my interest in this, because that is the ask, and I really respect the work and the effort and where they're trying to go with it for sure. I've partnered with them in the past in other capacities, but I would just say that I appreciate, I know the 30% AMI is really a target area for municipal housing in the counties and everybody, but having some flexibility or just knowing that you can go up to 50 because there are some really good projects out there too that are at 50 where you've got, working people who are in poverty and, they might not be able to afford a regular market rate and they fall through the cracks. So I just wanted to make sure to understand where we're at with our current vouchers, so thank you.
Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, did you have a response?
Oh, Mr. Chair, if I may, Councilmember Johnson, we do not have the ability to restrict vouchers to 30% AMI as the administrator.
Right. And thank you. And that, I think I didn't word it clearly, but that's just what I was trying to understand, that, in policy, because I believed and I thought I knew in fact other projects that were above that. So thank you for that clarification. That's important.
Yeah, thanks, Terri and Stephanie. Just a quick question on this last point that you made, which I think is a really good one. So if we go up, we're at 14% right now on project-based vouchers. If we go up to 30, then that's it. That's like a cap, right? It's not 30% every year. It's 30% of the total number. But there are some scenarios, right, where a project-based voucher that it has been designated could come back into circulation. If a building sold and no owner isn't going to participate in the program, right? So it's a cap, but there's some number of units that would return to the pool.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Lilligren, it's something we're looking really closely at. We've been project basing since the year 2000. We've never had any units come back to us. But we're doing some deep dive digging into PBVs, and we're going to share that at the Community Development Committee meeting with you all on September 5th, because we have some that have some systemic vacancy issues. And if they're project-based voucher units that are sitting vacant month after month, year after year, it's something we could consider as taking some of those back into the broader circulation.
Great, thanks. I look forward to seeing that.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. My name is Stephanie Paulson. I'm the Assistant Director at the Metro HRA. And so Terri's portion of the presentation covered a lot of the project-based vouchers and kind of some history. I'm going to be telling you today about some plans and kind of work plan items and the other components of the PHA plan. There are 3 minor revisions that we are proposing and will come to CDC and again at full council as a part of our 2024 annual PHA plan. They are related to criminal history admission language, informal review process, and special purpose vouchers. So I'm going to go into a little bit of a little bit of detail with each one. Criminal history language admission. So right now our plan, the way our plan is written, is that drug convictions and violent criminal activity essentially live almost together. So it is if you have a drug conviction or there's credible evidence of a violent criminal activity, then you could be denied admission. We are proposing language that those separate and that we would no longer be denying admission for minor drug convictions. So if someone has a conviction 2 years and 9 months ago for a minor misdemeanor charge that when they were 19 years old, that may have been a blanket denial. we were saying we're gonna, and what was kind of part of our operating procedure just informally is we look at those. We say you were 19 years old, it was 2 years, 11 months and 15 days ago, and so we just want to kind of align our process, our policy document more with our process and thinking about things. That way the other recommendation that we're making is in our informal review process to align more with our informal hearing process. An informal review is when an applicant disputes a decision that the housing authority has made. And so what we're saying is just aligning our due process more formally to match our informal hearing. You can request a review internally, then you can request a third party to review the documents completely. You can have an appointment in person or virtually, and just to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to have all aspects of their due process. And we've been doing that, but the language was slightly unclear, so it's really just adding clarifying language to our administrative plan. And the final change that we're proposing is just updating industry experts because of all the special voucher allocations, special purpose voucher allocations, VASH, mainstream, foster youth, the independents, all of these special vouchers, they've now created a special chapter for us. As opposed to just living throughout administrative plans, we now have a chapter 19, which they have said, you know what, we recognize that there's lots of different vouchers available and we're going to keep them in this special part of our admin plan, which will also make it easier for us to cite, to make citations and also to make changes if we need to stay in line with what the recommendation is by the feds.
Mr. Chair. So is that a HUD direction?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So we get our Chair and Councilmember Lilligren, we get direction from Nan McKay, which is an industry expert. They provide us templates each year and follow the guidance by HUD and say this is recommended standard practice for PHAs across the nation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also part of our annual PHA plan, our resident advisory board engagement. I think we've talked extensively about the ways at CDC and then maybe even broadly when we have the opportunity about the ways that we're going to engage the residents that we serve. We've been talking extensively about how we can start exploring home ownership. And what we learned in the last 12 months is that we need to not only be thinking about home ownership, but also wealth building and financial empowerment. Because it is, what we heard is that understanding people's savings goals is actually the first step in understanding kind of this process of wealth building. So is your savings goal, if we were to talk to a resident and say, what's your savings goal? Maybe your savings goal is, I'd like $2,000 in savings. And with that $2,000, I want to build so that I'm going to buy a car. And then after that, I want to do, and someone may have a very clear picture of what they have for savings goals, and that's what we kind of want to explore. What we've been doing with our manager of outreach and special initiatives and another outreach coordinator, Margaret Perez and Caitlin, we have been working really intently in having ways that we can engage a broader group. And then once we get a broader group engaged, ask if they would be willing to commit to the next year to be part of almost like a focus group. Walk us through this. Let's talk really, really intentionally about what you think would be valuable. Do you want more resources? Should we create more formal partnerships? We've had conversations with Family Housing Fund and Neighborhood Works. We've had conversations with the Department of Veterans Affairs and thinking about ways that we could partner with veterans and really just making sure that we as the Housing Authority aren't making decisions for people, but with people. And so that's what we're hoping with this next year, to continue doing more in depth. So we had a couple meetings there. The next meeting that we hosted as a part of our resident engagement over the past years. What do our policies, how do the HRA's policies help or hurt the moving process? So we have to balance that administrative burden with what is realistic in the current moving market. The Metro HRA has historically had this rule where you provide a 60-day move notice. That allows time for families to get all of their paperwork updated, for us to issue a voucher and kind of begin the search process. Is that in line with current market practice? And that's what we wanted to know. What are you finding is helpful, hurtful, harmful, or if you had a magic wand, what would you change about our move process? And that was a conversation that we had with residents. It was interesting. Some of the things I think that people are willing to share is really, really valuable. One, in the meeting, one person talked about even like the 12 hours that exists, right, from move out to move in, and what the housing authority could do for those 12 hours. Can we, and it was really awesome collaborative conversation and sharing, but just the anxiety that exists in the 12 hours, right? It's not even 5, 6, 7 months of homelessness. It's 12 hours where I don't know where to put my things because I've moved out and turned in my keys and I can't move into the next place yet. So these are the conversations that we're having with residents to make sure that that again, they're part of making the decisions with us and we are making decisions for people.
I'm
Can't see
sorry.
my hand, I'm ready.
No, I can't see you. Go ahead, Councilmember Chandler.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate getting these quarterly and annual updates. I have a couple questions. I've heard a couple times about, administrative constraints or burdens and how that may impact our turnover vouchers. I'm wondering if we have done any communication with Minneapolis about potentially streamlining that process so that we can take in the individuals or homeowners or renters that come from Minneapolis and have that process be more streamlined so that we don't have to utilize our own resources. Perhaps if we is there something that we can get in exchange for the money? or is there something that we can get in terms of streamlining it so that it can happen more quickly? I think maybe if we resolve that issue, we'll be able to serve more people. Perhaps it's worth conversations or, retreat or something like that. And then my other question was related to the homeownership and wealth building. I've often talked about, that we focus on certain aspects of income, but we're not looking at the household budget, for example. So I was really happy to see that we're having these conversations, but from what I'm hearing, it could take years before we get information about household wealth. Is there some practical way that we can use this information sooner?
Chair and Councilmember Chambliss, thank you for your questions, and I wonder if you want to address maybe the first comment that she made about, I'm happy to take some of them.
Sure, happy to, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chambliss. In terms of the portability with Minneapolis, the 10 housing authorities here in the metro area, we have some common understanding with portability that doesn't exist outside of the metro area and even within our state. So for example, we try to streamline as much as possible. So for example, if someone has a reasonable accommodation in Minneapolis for an extra bedroom, they'll call us ahead of time and say, hey, we're sending Stephanie's paperwork over here. She has an extra bedroom. Will you look at this reasonable accommodation approval, see if you'll approve it? Because they don't want to bother sending it if we're not going to approve it. So we do a lot of that type of thing. We also try to streamline inspections as much as possible amongst the housing authorities. We all have different payment standards, so as an agreement amongst the metro area, we try to do some pre-screening to see if we're sending someone to Minneapolis, if the unit will work within their rent limits and vice versa. So we do a lot of that already. I think portability is one of the pieces of the program that makes the voucher program so successful, not only here but nationally, because of the choice component. Once a person has a voucher, they can move wherever they want. They can go to Ohio, Minnesota, wherever they want with the voucher. And so, but conversely, it's the most administratively burdensome piece, and it's regulatory. And so these choices, whether we bill or absorb, is a regulatory thing. And there are some small examples where we're operating in Minneapolis to ease administrative, and I won't get into the details, but we are administering some vouchers in Minneapolis to make it easier for some programs that we've opted out of. So we try to do as much of that as we can, but I think there's a limit to some of that.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for explaining, what some of the challenges are and opportunities that you've already taken advantage of. I think there's probably room for more streamlining. I don't know, that's between Minneapolis and our HRA, but I would think it would be good to continue looking at that.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Chandler, just one more thing, like having a combined waiting list for the entire region. Every housing authority, 10 of us have our own waiting list. So people are on this one, this one, this one. They don't know what list they're on, if they change their address or their move or their email address, if they change it with us, it's like chasing in circles. And so we've tried to do some of that. We have a regional utility allowance that we now use. So, but I agree, we can always do more. So thank you for that. Stephanie, I'll let you take the question about well building.
Sure. And Chair and Councilmember Chambliss, I might also add that recently we started discussions with some of the local housing authorities to say, hey, would you all be open to the idea of us absorbing the first 10 that come in? We will just right off of the bat, the first 10 that come in every single month, we'll absorb the voucher to try and ease, just another ease of that administrative burden. And it does take some intentional conversation and collaboration, because when we absorb their vouchers, we impact their utilization, right? So they need to be okay, but then we say, take 10 of ours, right? So the first 10 we send to you, you take them, and the first 10 that come to us, we'll take yours. And so in that scenario, nobody's losing in utilization and are reporting to the federal government. We're just easing administrative burden. And so I appreciate that comment very much, because you're ready to work in the housing authority, because you're already thinking like us. You're ready.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Sue.
I think it'll be a relatively quick question. I'm curious as to whether or not you have any data as to the increase or the loss in the number of landlords, particularly at the 30% level prior to and since COVID. If you don't have that information tonight, I certainly understand. But I'd appreciate knowing that going forward, because there's been so much debate at the local level about rental issues, about affordable housing. I think that would be good information to have.
Chair and Councilmember Vento, in a future slide, you're ready for the housing authority too, Councilmember Vento. In a future slide, I was going to talk in our community choice slide, but I'll kind of allude to it now, that there are some of the really program-specific updates we wanted to share. There's 69 new properties that we've identified as a part of that demonstration that have not been associated with our program, but with our landlord engagement and outreach, we've identified 16 new properties in the suburbs that are willing to rent to some of the program participants. So,
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
just real quick, and what, is there a net gain in that? Are we retaining as fast as we're attracting?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, that's a really hard question, because there are so many large management companies that manage all different properties. So if they, we used to have 1,800 active landlords, we currently have 1,400. We're still serving more families and more units. It's hard to say if we is giant management company X just managing more units, because, we count, so they would only come up as one landlord. So it's hard to answer that question. I'm not sure we even have the data in our system to identify that. We do identify new landlords, so it's a hard question to answer.
Mr. Chair, when I served in Plymouth on the HRA and as a council member, we had a very defined area, so we could more easily see who was coming and going. And I remember when the 20-year mark for Section 8 at the time for housing choice vouchers, the deadline came, and landlords, owners had the right to get out. And we did a scramble of formation of our assets to get in there and try to save some of those. And it's a lot of hard work. So whether it's the buildings themselves, the management, it'd be nice to get some insights on, are we, making, I know the effort is heroic and 69 is great, for sure. And yet, it's just kind of like with affordable housing generally, we're losing them faster. The preservation is a problem of affordable housing in this region and everywhere. So even we can't build our way out of the problem, right? So it's kind of that where I'm coming from, but just curious how the marketplace is going out there. And maybe I'm wrong about this, but those big ones that have a lot of, you hope that we keep them in, because if they change, it's a big loss too. So I know you guys are working on it like crazy, but I'm trying to reflect and understand the magnitude of everything you have going on. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sue.
One more question, a little bit different direction. how much does the heat, both during the winter and during the summer, impact the cost of our affordable housing options? And does HUD give additional funding for that on any kind of a regular basis? I went past a housing development today that it's clearly an affordable housing. I think it's at 30% AMI, but I can't say that for sure. And I noticed small air conditioners in each unit. And my first thought was, I wonder if they can afford to turn them on. I wonder if they know how to maintain them. I mean, just all those questions started rushing through my head. So.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Bento, voucher holders get a credit for tenant paid utilities.
That's right.
So if they pay electricity, they get a credit, but the credit that they get is based on average consumption of an average household. And so if they're running the AC at the highest level 24/7, they're probably going to pay more in their electric bill than they get for the allowance. On the other hand, if they don't turn it on at all, their credit is probably more than their electricity bill. So depends on household consumption, but they do get a credit.
Thanks. I learned that before I had forgotten. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I just had a question. I know this has been the hottest summer on record, and it's projected it's going to get hotter and hotter over time, although you're going to have some aberrations. How is that factored in with your forward planning in terms of global warming and increased temperatures?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Carter, it's a good question. So we revise our what we call utility allowance schedule once a year. And what we do is gather average rates of consumption and current rates from various utility companies around the region. And then we take those averages and it goes into a schedule. And so it's really based on the rates that the utility companies are charging and average consumption of an average household. So the current formula doesn't take into account climate change or any of those things yet, and it's a federally regulated process to update the utilities. So it's an area where we don't really have discretion. So maybe in the future we'll see something to that. If we were a moving to work agency, we could make up our own rules and then we could do things differently, but we're not. So someday we may get there.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Just to that point, we all probably knew that in the last year, Xcel Energy had a big case before the PUC for a major rate increase. And I think maybe it was at CDC, and I thought, gosh, maybe we should start paying attention to some of this as it impacts our residents, right? Our clients. And then they withdrew their case. So I'm not sure of the political behind all of that, but it's just something that, we should probably keep an eye on too when those rate cases go forward. And again, love Xcel, they've got to do their infrastructure and other things too, but it's just something that, we might have an opinion on at some point.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Carter and Councilmember Johnson, I might also add that where we do have control, we absolutely are exploring that very topic that you bring up. So with our council-owned properties, we're starting to explore kind of do just a baseline assessment. How can the council-owned units be more energy efficient? And looking really, really intentionally about doing kind of an energy audit, an assessment of where we sit with those units, because we have control there. Those 154 units and the way we spend our capital dollars, the way that policymakers want us to focus our capital dollars is within our control. And so know that I think this month I'm coming to the CDC, the Family Affordable Housing Program, and that I can share updates there too, but feel free to continue asking those questions because they're great questions.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, we were poor, so in the summertime, we would have to sit out on the steps because we couldn't afford the air conditioning. And it was not till like about 10 years later, I was almost an adult, where we could afford air conditioning. And it wasn't just my house, it was a whole block. So I know there are a lot of families who face that, food is first, rent is first, but, with the increase in the heat, that's an impact. So we have to factor that in at some point.
Sue, and then I'm looking at the clock, and I know that we want to get to our transit safety presentation, so let's.
It's not a question and it won't require an answer, but in addition to that, Dr. Carter, public swimming pools and the decline in the number of public swimming pools and the impact that it has.
That heat is having.
Yeah.
In the interest of time, I'll go real fast.
No, it's okay. This is great. These are great questions, by the way, but you have a lot to share.
I'll just share some brief highlights with you, and some of these were already talked about, and so we can move over them fairly quickly. And we've maintained a over 99% utilization of all of our vouchers. We were awarded those FYI vouchers, the special purpose vouchers. We have a partnership with Anoka County, Carver County, and Hennepin County, and the public child welfare agencies. We continue to request additional special purpose vouchers when available. Veterans vouchers, we will request mainstream vouchers when they become available again. The 218 emergency housing vouchers that were already shared, Director Smith already shared with you about those, and the project-based vouchers that were offered to serve veterans and people experiencing homelessness this year. I'm coming to the CDC meeting on Monday to talk to you about the Homework Starts with Home program. And just at a high level, we have an existing program with Ramsey County that started in 2020, and we were just awarded a partnership from Minnesota Housing Finance Agency with Anoka County to do the Homework Starts with Home program with Anoka County, another place-based initiative that the HRA has explored. But it is another really awesome opportunity to make sure that families are able to stay housed and stable where they want to live. The HRA will commit 10 housing choice vouchers per grant year, similar to the model with Ramsey County, just on a smaller scale because the program's smaller, as a part of this program. But again, I will see you on Monday, CDC members, to go into greater detail on that. We talked briefly about the financial empowerment and wealth building strategies. Just know that we are exploring different options and opportunities to get this information and really make an informed decision. Councilmember Chambliss and Chair, going back to your question earlier, I don't think it's an if or, it's an and. We're continuing to explore homeownership and wealth building. We're continuing to think about goal savings and financial empowerment, but it's really just us continuing to step back and say, we aren't making a decision for you. We're not going to say we're going to focus everything here. We want to make sure that we have important conversations along the way, and then thinking that we would come to visit you all again in this situation or at a CDC meeting to share with you all what we're learning and for you to share with us what kind of your priorities are. The community choice demonstration, we exited our pilot in June 1st, 2023. As a reminder, we partnered with Minneapolis Public Housing. It was a competitive process to apply for this program. 9 sites were initially awarded, and this study is focused on children with families 18 and under, and really just testing what mobility supports do to this, how mobility supports impact people being able to move to different areas that have historically been less accessible. Things like movers expenses, security deposits, application fees, staff devoted to housing search assistance. These are all some of the supports that some families may receive. We hired 4 staff exclusively to work on this demonstration, and like I shared earlier, 69 properties are new to our portfolio as a result of the demonstration. We have 161 families enrolled now, and we have a handful of families that are now leased and living in their units. Some are working towards kind of getting ready for move. Maybe it's financial counseling or kind of a record expungement, whatever it may be, in different phases of moving. And last but not least, just sharing some upcoming dates. Our public hearing is August 21st, 2023. Our public comment period will end August 31st, 2023. We will visit the CDC for a more in-depth PHA plan discussion on September 5th. And assuming that we don't need additional space for conversation, we will be back on September 18th to the CDC for final review and approval. So that's a tentative plan for what you can expect coming up from the HRA and future presentations.
Mr. Chair, I think I ask this every year, But the Community Development Committee has the final approval, correct, or does it come to the council?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Lilligren. It'll come to, the public hearing only occurs at CDC, but the final approval of the Public Housing Agency Plan and Admin Plan come to CDC first, followed up by approval by the council.
Thank you. Thank you.
In October, I think, I forgot what the date, October, early October.
October 5th, I think.
Well, Terri, Sophia, this is a lot of great material. Any last questions, thoughts?
Great work.
I know that you're coming to the CDC and there's some more discussions ahead and including before the full council, so we look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, now, we're now ready for the quarterly report on our transit safety and security action plan. Welcome, Chief. This may be the first meeting. Don't have to say interim. I can say General Manager Lesley Kandaras, and I know you have the whole group to make this quarterly presentation. So, okay, we're starting with you, Chief. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, council members. This afternoon, I'm going to go over the quarter 2 numbers and the progress that we've made in the Metro Transit system. And I'll start with the first slide. Wow. So this is a great highlight and introduction to our model moving forward. And this was our first great day in transit. We're supporting the 40-point safety and security action plan. We actually had all Metro employees take part in being visible within the system. And I believe moving forward, that's the strategy to implement and take control and experience the same positive effects that we've been seeing in this last quarter. How are we doing this? We're doing this first and foremost with patrol operations. We've been taking a proactive step. What does that mean? That means removing the officers from the cars and getting them out onto the LRTs and getting them out onto the BRTs. We understand that we have a large footprint and area of responsibility. However, I want focused enforcement. And this means, from a historical perspective, identifying those crime areas, getting the officers out of their cars, onto the LRTs, into the trains, on the buses, so that they can make eye contact with our commuters and make them feel safe and comfortable to return. We've seen early success with this with several events: the Taylor Swift concert, the Pride concert, Beyonce, Aquatennial, and other several events. We've also done this by conducting flare enforcement and educational operations, where instead of citing them right now, we're taking an educational approach and we're reminding people of their responsibility to pay for their fares. More importantly, what we're doing is directing them to ticket vending machines when they haven't paid their fares. So we give them an opportunity to not only educate them, but to pay the fare. We see it more just at this point to educate them, direct them to pay their $250 as opposed to finding them $180. Another third strategy that we've been conducting is we've been working with our joint beats and initiatives. And this is working with our law enforcement partners: Minneapolis Police Department, the Airport Police, Bloomington Police, and U of M, just to name a few. And what we're doing is working collaboratively and strategically focusing on areas that have historically been problematic. We've seen this work in Lake Street and Midtown Station, where it was one of our most problematic stations. It's now one of our model stations. And there's other reasons for that I'll go into later. This effect has led to updates within our ComStat system. So I have reorganized the ComStat system to report on live statistical crime analysis. So with that said, we have been experiencing live information and deploying people rapidly to get control of the issues that we've been experiencing. When we look at calls for service, we look to the chart, light blue, dispatch calls compared to officer-initiated calls on the right, which are highlighted in dark blue. As you can see from the beginning of the year, January to most recently, the end of the quarter in June, our calls for service were increased based on officer presence. It proves proactive policing, particularly in the months of May and June, where it went up to 55%, and 56%. When we look at our Group A crimes by month, Group A crimes include 52 offenses. However, they're broken down into 24 categories. Those are assaults, thefts, false info, fare, invasion, drug equipment, vandalism, and weapons. So these are our Group A crimes, and we see from March, April, May to June, a steady decline. When we look at Group A crimes reported from top 7 on the left, dark blue, and other crimes on the right in light blue, the top 7 for 17 crime categories, most common within the Metro Transit Police Department, are fraud, which are fare invasion, drug equipment, vandalism, and weapons. Those are most notably the issues we deal with on a regular basis throughout our entire system. When we look at the FBI's top 7 categories, homicide, sex offenses, robbery, assault, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, burglary, those are what are tracked across the nation from the FBI. What we can see on both charts is a steady decline. Code of conduct violations. This is where we heavily focus on improving the system because this is all about customer experience. And when we talk about customer experience, we talk about perception. So regardless of the success that we're having with a decrease in crime, the perception and the experience is what's most important. So we've been focusing on that omnipresence and getting our uniform officers out and visible and making contact with the cars. So I'll give you an example of this where we assign a specific area to the police officer. They get out of their vehicle, they get onto the light rail train vehicle. In between stops, they step off onto the platform, they make eye contact with the person, that's a positive interaction. They step back onto the car, proceed to the next stop. Then they return to their car. They return back to their vehicle to proceed patrol. What we have seen is we've seen a decline originally in April of our nuisance issues, and that's intimidation, loitering, disorderly conduct, nonviolent felony offenses, interference with vehicle operations, and consumption of food and alcohol. Also followed by alcohol, tobacco, and narcotics. We saw a slight increase in the month of May. However, we refocused and we have a decline in June. However, it would be naive of me to say if this also wasn't seasonal. And we realize come October, we're going to have a challenge when it gets cold and people start returning to the system. With that said, I want to remind you that through our consistent approach, we feel that we'll have a handle on it and we'll still make strides moving forward. As I noted earlier, part of this exercise is through our fare enforcement exercises where we're getting the officers out there, we're reminding them not only on the LRT but the BRTs as well to focus and remind people of their responsibility to pay their fare. We have an increase there and you can see it's moved up from historically, well lately from 15,000, almost doubled to 30,000. We feel that this is an important exercise moving forward and we hope that later on as we have trip personnel coming in that they'll also assist us with this responsibility and we'll be able to take it away from the police officers so they can focus on crime enforcement. Cases assigned to our investigators. We have 5 investigators currently responsible for the caseload. In 2022, we had 2,076 cases. In 2023, as of right now, we have 1,384. That's a 46% increase year to date. When you compare that numbers, that was 947 compared to 1,384 cases same time this year. Case charging outcomes. This has come up in earlier committee of the whole meetings. And this is very important. This is a snapshot of 2022. And we had referred 2,111 cases to our local prosecutors in the areas. Currently under review, we have 71 or 3.36%. Cases declined by attorneys were 4. Cases pending in court currently are 747 or 35.39%. Cases dismissed in court is 806, or 18%. Cases with full convictions, 218, or 15%, and cases with partial convictions, or 165, or 7.82%. Metro Transit Police Department staffing continues to be a challenge. Our full staffing numbers are 171. For the end of this quarter, we were at 107 full staff employees. As you can see across the board, we have this challenge in every area, and we're currently down 168 employees for the Metropolitan Transit Police Department. That's including civilians as well. We have recruitment efforts that we continuously work on. We have upcoming academies in August and September. We hope to have a third one before the end of the year. We're working diligently with our human resources department to develop a cadet program. And what this cadet program entails is individuals who already have a degree, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, or advanced education, and we want to fast track them into the Minnesota Post-Sport Skills Program so that we can get them out and into the academies in the faster levels. We've reduced our normal hiring process from a seven-month process down to a couple of months, and we've done this by decreasing that into a one-day hiring workshop, which means we bring you in, we have 3 levels of interviews. If you pass the interviews, we take you down into background where we fingerprint you, and we just streamline the process to make it better so that we can offer conditional offers on a faster level so we don't lose potential candidates. We also host recruitment events, we attend recruitment events, and we continuously recruit and focus on hiring full-time officers, lateral officers, as well as community service officers. Work culture is very important. We feel that by celebrating staff accomplishments is absolutely important, and it goes a long way. And we've done this recently by celebrating promotions. We recently held uniform promotions on June 7th, 2023. We also are going to have an awards day on August 16th, 2023. So we feel by celebrating the officers' victories, the members, the sworn members of the departments, as well as civilians, they understand that we appreciate who they are by acknowledging the work they do on a daily basis. We will be celebrating our 30th anniversary, which was yesterday, formally on August 23rd. I'm extending an invitation to each and every one of you. Career enrichment. We have 2,133 hours of training hours in the second quarter. And we believe this is essential, especially in light of what's recently happened, to keep our officers trained in the latest and greatest technology so that we can guide them in the right directions as we move forward in the law enforcement profession. And we have formal career development in planned phases where we're working with our HR to utilize this as a retention tool. We want to give a path moving forward to our officers so they see their future within our agency. Great Workplace Project is an important engagement that we're currently involved in and most appreciated. Why is this? Because it fosters employee engagement. For the most part, what I require of the supervisors and myself as well is to interact with the police officers on a daily basis and to let them know that they have a voice, that this is a shared vision. I give you the focus, I tell you where I want you to go, but I want their input as well. Mental health support is also very important, especially in light of what's taken place in law enforcement for the last several years. What people often forget is that there's a human being behind the officer, behind the uniform. But we have young officers in the field as well. And what they don't yet understand is coping mechanisms. So we want to give them opportunities to vent and say that you have an ear, not only within your agency, but outside as well, should you need someone to speak with. And celebrating diversity. Equity and inclusion is absolutely important. I would say that we're one of the most, if not the most, diversified department within the region. Why is this important? Because we want to be reflective of the citizens within the state of Minnesota that we serve on a daily basis. And we continue to prioritize recruitment, training, and mentorship. We also work on collaborative policing. We realize that we need our community partners for this to be successful. Most recently, on May 31st, we started Transit Service Intervention Project, which is a 12-week project. And what it consisted of was the first 3 weeks, we teamed our homeless action team with community service outreach partners. And it was to reach out to members in our community that we utilize in our system that needed services. Crisis intervention, homeless, and chemically dependent individuals. That is successful and is still ongoing. The second phase of that was a 9-week program with our law enforcement partners. We currently have a partnership with Bloomington, the Airport Police, Minneapolis Police Department, and we're working on a contract with the U of M, with the students returning later this month, moving out this semester. We also work with garage liaisons. We have a first line supervisor in the rank of sergeant who's assigned to each one of our local garages so they can speak with the garage managers and report any issues that they may see arising within the system so that we can address them immediately. And we have joint powers agreements with our law enforcement partners in the region as well. And we're developing long-term approaches to outreach services with our stakeholders and business partners. Supplemental security. May 31st, we contracted with supplemental security, as everyone in the room knows. We originally contracted with 6 locations. After further analysis, we went from 6 to 7 locations, with the newest location being I-34 West on Lake Street. We currently have our supplemental security assigned to Lake Street. As I mentioned earlier today, Lake Street went from one of our worst to our model stations. As a matter of fact, we'll be celebrating the opening of a station, the South Tower, on August 4th. We'll be reopening it. On August 15th, we'll be celebrating that momentous occasion. We also have supplemental security at Franklin stations. Within the next 2 weeks, we should be, and we're expected to assign supplemental security to I-35 and Brooklyn Center Transit Center. And with this approach, if there are any questions, I would say that this is what's led to our success for Q2.
Any questions?
Any questions? Yes.
Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you, Chief Ross. It's great to have you here. This is only, our second year of having these quarterly reports, I think, and I just want to say how much I appreciate them. So, and 2 things. One is a question, one's just a comment. But on slide 11 with the charging outcomes in the court, and this has been a lot of discussion for years here. I mean, it feels like Metro Transit Police can do the greatest job with enforcement, but then if cases are kind of lost through the charging into the court system, what can we do to improve those outcomes? And so I was just wondering, on the ones that are dismissed, and I'm just not 100% sure how this would be tracked or recorded, but it would be interesting to know how many of those individuals participated in, say, diversion programs, or there were other supports that came and affected the outcomes of the court's process, but might not be that bad, or might actually be kind of a good thing.
Mr. Chair, Councilman Lilligren, my approach is to meet with the local prosecutors to look further into this and to see what the outcomes of those declined prosecutions were, if they were directed into a diversion program.
Okay, very cool, thanks. And the other piece, I just want to really commend you. You said it a couple times about officers, being in the vehicles, which is great, but then making eye contact. And you said that a few times, and just that human connection is so important between law enforcement and the communities that they're serving. And in my very early time on the Minneapolis City Council, I lived in the Phillips area, a very high crime area. I was friends, a lot of my friends and constituents were people who were really frontline and getting out and organizing the community, working with law enforcement, the business community, their neighbors, and it was risky. It was a risky time in Phillips neighborhood, and shortly during my first term in office, a lot of these friends of mine and neighbors came to me and they would say, I was out in the yard and a squad car went by and I waved at the officers and she didn't wave back, or he didn't wave back. And these were people that were literally putting their lives on the line to try to reclaim their communities, but that's what really mattered to them. That officers weren't participating in the acknowledgement that we're all part of one community. So I think that approach of making eye contact with our customers is just really excellent. I commend you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. I really appreciate you, Lesley, and Chief, when they sent us this to pre-read for today's meeting, I said, hey, can we get the charging information? So that was a quick turnaround, and I really appreciate you bringing that today, because I think the important thing for us to know as policymakers, and certainly practically because you've got investigators working very hard on these cases, is that, you know, closing that loop of understanding what happens to people in that system. And to your point, Councilmember Lilligren, diversion could be a great thing, and how is that being tracked? And thank you, Chief, for reaching out to each one of them to have that discussion. You know, I think we've said in the past, are there things that we can do, and certainly through election cycles when county attorneys are up, we should be out having those rigorous discussions with them. So I really appreciate you bringing this information forward. I hope that we can continue to track that, because so many of the times people ask us, and I know we've all heard this, what's Metro Transit Police Department doing to keep the trains safe? Well, we know that our problems are not unique. We see the problems of drug use, homelessness, mental health issues throughout the region, and they are finding their way to our transit stations, trains, buses. So it's really about those collaborative partnerships. So I salute you for continuing to build those partnerships to get the right people in the right place at the right time. It can't just be a police solution. We can lead the effort on our assets as we should, but it needs to be a comprehensive solution to address the growing use of fentanyl. Nobody has their arms around this thing, and that's what's showing up. So I commend you for all of this work. And thank you for bringing that data forward on the county attorney side. That for probably all of us, but me in particular, having worked, you know, supporting a police department for 20 years in my former role, you know, we would become frustrated and we wanted to understand it better. So I love the approach you're taking. Also, I just want to mention a couple of things. Really love the career development as far as retaining our officers. That's huge. And then two more quick things. Do we do recruitment outside of the region, outside of the state for officers that might want the great quality of life that we have here in the MSP region? Just curious about that. And then second of all, separately, you mentioned our partnerships, our joint powers agreements. I didn't hear you say St. Paul PD. I'm just wondering where they are in the mix. So just those last two questions about recruiting outside of the region, state, and St. Paul.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson. In regards to St. Paul, we are putting a JPA out with them. We just have our JPA up for review with the airport as of right now. Then we'll be moving over to Minneapolis and St. Paul because of the bigger departments, as well as Bloomington PD. So we do have them in the works with those departments as well. And as far as recruiting outside of the region, what we do is we post our positions on Minnesota Post Board. Currently in Minnesota, this is a regional issue, and they have 191 postings as of today. So it's a challenge not only for Metro Transit Police Department, but a challenge for the law enforcement community region-wide as well. So we do offer these opportunities, particularly when it comes to lateral positions, and we offer them. As a matter of fact, we did have a member from the NYPD who was coming over. Unfortunately, he was injured during the medical, and he's recovering.
And Mr. Just a quick follow-up. And again, outside of Minnesota, are there, you know, the National Police Association or whatever it might be called to, you know, attract people from, you know, the greater region, the Midwest, or anywhere? I mean, we know that we've got great quality of life here, and, you know, I'm just wondering if there's an effort or a way that we can, and I don't even know if it's successful. I just know that other people across this country in all sectors of work are trying to steal our people. So having worked at Greater MSP, I can only imagine it is maybe the same for police officers or your profession, I don't know.
Mr. Chair, Councilman Johnson, thank you for that. We have, and we are aware of the challenges that are being faced across the law enforcement profession. We're trying to get very creative in ways of recruiting individuals, such as the usage of social media streams, streamlining our videos that communicate to today's generation of individuals to make the law enforcement profession more attractive. But I will also say that I definitely need the support of the media and my politicians to speak up the profession. And we need safety and security. Without safety and security, we don't have prosperity. So they go hand in hand with one another, and I encourage the support for the profession.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief.
Councilmember Cameron.
Thank you. So I had a couple of questions that kind of echo the comments that Councilmember Lilligren and Councilmember Johnson just made. So the first is, you don't have to provide this information now, it sounds like there's an ongoing conversation with some of the prosecutorial bodies across the region, but it'd be interesting to look at in those case charging outcomes, if there's something, if we're looking back a step and seeing in the charges that we're making, if there's a pattern in terms of the outcomes for those charges, and looking at that and being really really aware of what that process looks like and what's leading to a dismissal. In addition to what Councilmember Lilligren and Councilmember Johnson mentioned, that we're looking a few steps up in the process to make sure that we're really efficient with the time and the resources that we have. So you don't have to answer that question. It sounds like it's ongoing to review. But I do appreciate that partnership. I know we have had lots of conversations, you and I directly, on increasing the partnerships. I appreciate that you're focusing on some of the largest communities and service areas for those joint power agreements, but it's something that I think we touch so many different jurisdictions within our transit area that increasing that is really important. So I would be very supportive of that moving forward. On the topic of recruitment, I wanted to ask, where are we having the most success in recruitment? It sounds like we've had some success relative to other departments, and I know you may not want to reveal the secret sauce for our department, but could you talk about, is it from other departments? I know that you mentioned that we're recruiting heavily within Minnesota. Is it people outside of law enforcement who are coming in, or is it existing law enforcement that are moving to our work?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cameron, we've had early success from outside law enforcement. The issue comes to retaining them as well because of the vigorous process in the academy and field training iteration of our patrol. So the last academy class, we put in 5 individuals. Unfortunately, we lost 60% or 3 because of the vigorous process. It is a strenuous job, and not everyone's meant to do this job. And I often advise them that if they feel this isn't for them, I'd rather them walk away than to hurt themselves in the process. But yes, we are recruiting people from outside law enforcement with no prior law enforcement experiences. We had great success in that avenue because of a different approach that we're taking. And we're looking to improve upon that approach on a daily basis.
And then I had one other question, and you mentioned working with the garage liaisons. I just wanted to ask, to what extent are we engaging with, are the two pieces communicating in terms of Metro Transit staff, particularly our operators, and some of the safety and security action plan steps that you've been taking?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cameron, thank you for that question. I may be taken away from someone else's thunder here. But what we do on a regular basis, we hold coffee with a cop, and we've been doing town halls as well, speaking to the operators, going right to them, hearing their concerns, making our presentation as to what we're doing, also hearing their concerns and their challenges, and reinforcing the importance of collaborative policing and partnerships between all of us to make the system better.
Okay, thank you. And Chai, Councilmember Lee, have a question, and then I know we want to hear from some others, so thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief. Thanks, Chief. I don't know, you said we have a very diverse force, and that's great. And I want to know how we're supporting, if there are ethnic affinity groups in our officer corps, there's associations for Latino officers, Asian officers, etc., how we support their activities and their professional development so that they can also grow in their jobs and advance up the ranks in management and leadership. And support them going to events and conferences outside of the state, or even hosting things that are national but here, so that maybe we can attract other officers, because our officers are probably our best ambassadors.
Mr. Chair, Councilman Lee. Thank you for that question because it's absolutely important and we do support this. As a matter of fact, we have 4 training iterations throughout the year for each officer and we do support the conferences. So every one of the ethnic backgrounds, we do support their conferences and what they do is we support the conference fees, we pay for the conference fees and we give them days off. They're required to pay their airfare and per diem, their hotels. But we do support this so that they can bring back information that they obtain and they can promote it throughout their communities and promote professional law enforcement.
Thank you. Chief, thank you. We really could keep listening to you and your stories. Really appreciate your leadership. We know that in the recruiting and in retaining, people work for individuals, and we really appreciate your leadership and really building this force.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome, General Manager Kandaras.
All right, good afternoon, Chair, Council members. I am Lesley, Kandaras, the Metro Transit General Manager, and I'm going to kick off the second part of our presentation today, which is the Safety and Security Action Plan Implementation Update. I'm going to go through my pieces pretty quickly because we have several presenters here to talk about work that they're leading, and some of them have a couple hard stops. So if I go too quickly through anything, we can come back to it at the end. But every quarter when we come to you, I like to start with this slide you've seen before, just to remind you of the body of work that culminated in the Safety and Security Action Plan that the Council endorsed last June 2022. It's comprised of these 3 areas of work: improving conditions on our system, training and supporting employees, and engaging customers and partners. And in the lead up to that, there was extensive community engagement and employee engagement that's really led to what are now 42 items in the action plan. I'll note we have 2 new items this quarter. One is in that first area of work, improving conditions on the system, and is focused on capturing the work we're doing as we evaluate the smoking of narcotics on vehicles, and that's definitely been a concern of employees and customers, and so we're starting to track the work we're doing along that issue in its own action item now. The other action item we added relates to the Transit Service Intervention Project that the Chief spoke about earlier, and Celina Martina, who's leading up that effort, will present in a bit more detail in a moment. But part of what we really want to focus on tonight too is how we're integrating some of the legislation that passed this past session into our action plan. For the most part, the new provisions that were included in the Transportation Omnibus fit with work and action items we already had in the plan, but we did add the Service Intervention Project as a new one. I'll just mention before leaving this slide too, that as part of the Safety and Security Action Plan, we've made several commitments to continue to provide you updates as we're doing this quarter. We also provide this information on our website, and we continue to put crime data on metrotransit.org/performance. This slide is meant just to be kind of the high-level overview of the status of each of our action items. Compared to last quarter, we have more items that have kind of graduated out of planning into some version of implementation. Like last quarter, we don't have any items that have not started. So the broad picture is things are moving forward. And along with materials disseminated for tonight, we do each quarter put together a full report that goes action item by action item to describe where we are per action item along with its status coding. So again, we can get into more detail on any of the specifics after the other presentations, but just wanted to remind you all that that's a resource as well, where we're really trying to show our work and being quite transparent about where this work stands. As I mentioned, our focus tonight really is, this is our first quarterly update to you since the closing of the 2023 legislative session. And the session included several provisions pertaining to public safety on transit. So the next several presenters are going to walk you through these elements to give you a sense of what the legislature is tasking us to do, where we stand on this work, and on many of these, if not all of them, we're going to be coming back to you in the coming months as we move forward with implementation. But our first presenter is going to be Celina Martina, our Senior Manager of Equity and Inclusion, to talk about the Transit Service Intervention Project.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Council members, good afternoon. Celina Martina, Senior Manager of Equity and Inclusion at Metro Transit. and I have been recently appointed to be, or told to be, the project manager for Transit Service Intervention Project. Actually, I'm gracefully accepting that appointment. So as Lesley shared, this project was included in the past legislative session as a coordinated effort to tackle issues experienced by our riders and on our LRT, so light rail trains and facilities, such as the green line and the blue line, and increased presence in our system. This project was launched just a couple days after the legislative session. So I think we had like 4 days or 5 days to launch the phase 1 with 3 weeks of social service outreach, led by our HAT team, the Homeless Action Team, led this first phase. Sergeant Rodriguez was earlier here, and she did a phenomenal job coordinating more than 12 outreach events during those 3 weeks, where we coordinated partners such as Hennepin County Housing Stability teams, Ramsey County Social Services, the Family Partnership, grassroots organizations that are violence prevention interrupters, and we were able to provide several hundreds of referrals to housing, mental health services, drug abuse in prevention interventions, and that, although concluded after 3 weeks, we continue to work in the system with those same partners and having at least 1 or 2 outreach events per week with the leadership of HAT. The second phase of the event, and I think that the chief really stole my thunder when he told you a little bit about the joint efforts of the law enforcement agencies. So we are working diligently, and that was part of phase 2 of this transit intervention project, with other law enforcement agencies to have formalized agreements, joint powers, where we can really intervene and be an enhanced presence in the system. You heard the chief talking about our airport police joint agreement, our Bloomington police, and continue to work with the other law enforcement agencies that are part of our geographical area of the green line and the blue line. Captain Grades is leading that effort, and also you heard the some of the challenges of this phase 2, I would say, that you heard from the chief are the capacity of our law enforcement agencies in the region to add additional strategies and really partake in these additional projects. So part of the legislation also included a $2 million to be disbursed to agencies and community-based organizations that are able to provide on-site interventions such as crisis response, mental health screenings and supports, substance abuse services, and assistance to those experiencing homelessness. It's really broad. The legislature, what it says about these $2 million, how they can be dispersed. And I'm happy to inform that we had a declaration of interest open. We received 30 proposals, very diverse proposals with a lot of ideas and information about how these agencies and social services, as well as community organized groups, can provide those type of interventions. We are currently reviewing 30 proposals and with aiming to disperse the funds by early October, so the community organizations can start working on this project. There is a deadline of this intervention project set by the legislature of June 30th, 2024. So we really want to get going with those partners and disperse the funds early on. Let me see my notes. Lastly, really, Sergeant Rodriguez has to step out today, but I wanted to acknowledge and recognize they had leadership in these. They gracefully took this project, ran with it this first 3 weeks, coordinated partners. They continue to share reports and ask for data, and they are a tremendous asset to our system, as well as really to the communities and the riders that are in need of services, like dire need of these services. So I really wanted to say that it's a pleasure for me to partner with the police department and with the HAT team in leading this intervention service, as transit intervention project. So, yeah. Any questions before I?
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the report and for the work on this. And I would second what you said about the HAT team and Sergeant Rodriguez as well. And so in my day job, I see them. I kind of intersect with the work that they're doing. And so I do have one question. You're talking about the community-based organizations. I just support that so much. Community members we're trying to engage are going to engage with someone from their community. We just know that, right? And kind of in light of what the chief said earlier about the focused supplemental security sites, and I think he said something like that's what he would credit the good stats in second quarter to that work. And I would note that of the 7 sites, 5 of them are in my district. And I don't know if that's something to brag about, but what does show is that focused effort matters. And so as you're looking at these community organizations, is that an evaluation filter you're using, the communities that we're most trying to engage, those are the community organizations we would want to lift up and partner with.
Absolutely. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Lesley, yes, absolutely. We're looking, so the legislation, the bill really is very broad in terms of working on-site, the green and blue line, but certainly we are looking at who are best to provide those services and intervention services, who are from the community, who know and have already worked on the light rail and the stations or areas that are adjacent to the, our stations and the light rail. So certainly we are taking into consideration all those. But you mentioned it's very important that we recognize that there are already groups working there without being compensated by us or by the legislature. So right now it's looking at who has the capacity. Those proposals have been really well written. It's a lot of reading. I was hoping to get, a number of proposals to be recommended for award earlier than later, but certainly we want to be thorough in how we review these proposals because the need is great and we need to match that need. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Chair, council members, I'm Sophia Ginis. I'm the Director of Community Affairs. I use she, her pronouns, and you can call me Sophia. I'm here to talk a little bit about our process to update the Code of Conduct. And it's been an effort that has been underway, and so we're in the process of reviewing the policies and procedures with our stakeholders, including reviewing requirements, and really a heavy focus on understanding and engaging in the rider experience. And so we've been asking our customers about both things that are part of our operational policy, but then also things that are part of state law. Not that we wouldn't enforce state law, right, but understanding what's important to them. So when we think about implementation and enforcement, we can adjust our messages and have focuses and really roll out an effective campaign. And so we are moving through the engagement process and getting very close to that pivot to implementation. And you've probably heard the amazing Pam Steffen come before you and talk about all of the in-reach that started the Code of Conduct process. I gotta give credit to Maria Cohn as well. And most recently, we've been focusing on engaging with our external audiences and customers. And that external engagement was based on all the internal work that we did to our in our agency before. So understanding what was important to our operators, understanding some of the work of our police, and our other frontline staff that are interacting with our Code of Conduct. And so we, as of yesterday, or today actually, yesterday was the last day it was open, had a survey out in the world to get that feedback, and that number was as of July 21st. We have just over 2,100 responses. The last bit coming in from as targeted events that we did at the closeout of the survey, including National Night Out. That little wonderful QR code and the links that we have make it so that we can actually track where we are getting the responses from. So I can tell you if they are from in-person direct engagement or if they're from our electronic communications. And that is an important thing for us to do because we want to demonstrate that we understand the customer experience and that we're reaching customers specifically that are in riding transit in places that have high code of conduct violations or where chief and staff spend a lot of time potentially trying to turn that as the stats. And so as I put the slide together, we had over 700 responses from direct engagement. Most of those were gathered from our Great Days in Transit, so the 2 Great Days in Transit. And you just see how that impact of having employees out there supporting our police and other frontline workers really makes a difference. Not only were we visible on the system, but we had thousands of conversations with riders. And a survey is actually hard to get somebody to take. You have to kind of almost convince them that it's worth it. And so we had over 300 employees getting people to take the survey. And a lot of times it was just holding up that slip and having somebody scan it on their phone and having them promise that they would take it once they got on the vehicle. So you're thinking of all these kind of joining programs, right? How one effort can help another effort in this system of really improving the customer experience on our wonderful transit. We also did the email and social media and other things to make sure that if you didn't happen to be riding with us that day, you still had the ability to give comment on this piece. And moving forward, now the analysis is underway. We've heard from our employees, we've heard from our customers. We'll bring that back. And we'll really start focusing our attention on developing that plan for implementation. And we'll be focusing on tone and need, and really thinking about how it's not just updating the code of conduct; it's having the code of conduct have an impact on our work. And that is the next steps. And you'll hear from the amazing, wonderful Miss Pam Steffen as that stuff moves forward.
Thank you, Sophia.
Mr. Chair, I'll just mention I had Sophia go because she's one of the people who needs to step out before 6. So we're going out of order. I should have explained what I was doing there. But Leah Palmer, who's our
Completely understandable.
acting trip manager, is going to talk about that legislative piece now.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. As Lesley mentioned, my name is Leah Palmer, and I am the interim manager for the Transit Rider Investment Program, which, as you may know, was created in this past legislative session and really codified a lot of the work that we were already directing our energies toward, and mostly having to do with having additional staff out on the system as a presence. Now, the legislation is really kind of 2 parts. It's the staffing part, but it's also decriminalizing fare evasion and creating an administrative citation program that basically is a civil system rather than getting into the criminal system for folks that have not paid fares. So part of the legislation was to continue that stakeholder engagement, and like my colleagues have talked about already, the Great Day in Transit survey, really actually starting back with the Citizens League and the police work group, and through InReach and the garages and things like that, we're hearing the same theme, which is a need for additional presence, and many people indicating that they did not want that to be additional officers, that there was a need for a police, but there's also a need for approachable individuals who could do something besides enforcement. And so that's where this program is really headed. So the personnel piece, first and foremost, anything having to do with fare inspection that is not police is part of the ATU bargaining agreement. And so we've been in negotiations with them since January 2023. And we're currently awaiting a response to our last proposal that was provided last month. Once that piece is in place, we'll start looking towards hiring with an eye towards marketing the position to underserved communities, to our riders, because we want folks that know the system. We want folks that represent a good chunk of our riders and are feeling comfortable, as Councilmember Lilligren said, people relate more to someone from their community. So definitely targeting those groups and saying, we want you to come make our transit system even better. So we'll be hiring up to 22 full-time employees this year, and we'll be looking to future growth. 22 will get us started, and then continue to grow the program as we evaluate it and see what the need is going to look like. It's a very robust training program that will tap subject matter experts from all parts of Metro Transit. There is of course a focus on the fare products and the administrative citation issuance, but we're also putting a good chunk of time into customer service. We're putting a good chunk of time into a good chunk of time into social services, and looking forward to working with HAT and other social service organizations, because one thing the legislation does is ask our personnel to go out and provide another layer of social services. So HAT is out there, other services and community groups are out there. This is one more group that will be able to say, hey, we're here, do you need assistance? Here's where we can direct you. And then there will be de-escalation, de-conflict training too, so some folks that may not react well for any number of reasons, teaching our folks to take those situations down and resolve them, peaceably. So the strategic deployment of these folks, these TRIP personnel, is going to be based on customer feedback, and it's going to be based on what we're hearing from our internal employees. It's also going to be based on that police data that we see, so that we know we're putting our people in the best place to use their time and resource effectively, and again, change that customer perception, that customer experience, because this is such a key component of that. And then the metrics. We'll be looking not only, of course, at the fare inspections and the administrative citations as we need to be, but also those social service referrals. How are we doing with that? Customers assisted. How many folks have we reached out to? And some maybe it's someone who needs just physical assistance getting on the train, or maybe it's someone who needs assistance finding their route. Those are the types of activities that the TRIP personnel will be doing as well. And then our operator contacts. We're out there to support our police, support our operators, support our frontline workers. So it's one more part of that whole team, that whole bit of energy that's going to be going into improving safety and security even more. So, of course, part of the Transit Rider Investment Program personnel is going to be their look. It's very important. How are they clothed, essentially, so that they convey a level of official presence, but also approachability. My vision and our vision right now is really to have something that is differentiated from police. So kind of more of a softer shirt like you're seeing there. This is what other transit agencies have. Police have a lot of equipment around their waist, so trying to avoid those kinds of items. Perhaps a shoulder bag like you're seeing, where they can carry literature, they can have first aid items. One of those first aid items the legislation does require is Narcan, and they'll be provided with training on how to use Narcan in those situations. And the second part, as I mentioned, is the administrative citation program. So the parts of it are, first, of course, developing the fine schedule, the fee schedule. The legislation indicates that it can't be less than 35, but it can't be more than 100. So what is that going to look like, in terms of what offenses are going to get you to 1 point? And then how do you pay them? So we're looking at incorporating into our online payment system, or in person, perhaps at service centers in Minneapolis and St. Paul, so that folks can go there and take care of their ticket. Now, if people can't pay the fine or need some sort of alternative resolution, we're exploring those options as well. So perhaps enrolling someone in our transit assistance program, which is income-based. So, $35 is out of reach for me, but I have 10 that I can put on a card, and we'll enroll you in the TAP program, where it's $1 a ride. So helping people, this isn't really intended to be punitive in the strictest sense of it. It's really intended to be an aid for people. We want fair compliance at the end of the day. And so looking towards those other options, perhaps community service, things of those natures that will help people understand that fair is a requirement, but also help them get to a place where they've taken care of the results of fair evasion. And then if someone wants to contest their ticket, the legislation calls for a third-party hearing officer. Can't be Metro Transit, it needs to be outside of Metro Transit. So we're exploring if that's going to be perhaps someone in a council department or maybe a third-party vendor. That is still being worked on and drafted, so I don't want to get too far into that. The agents will be issuing handwritten tickets at this time. Procuring or developing software and electronic systems is a bit of a process, and we're trying to get this program off and running as fast as possible. So, the paper ticket that you or me may have received at some point, maybe in the 90s or early 2000s, that's what that'll look like, and with the eye towards transitioning to that electronic ticket.
Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So for the payment process, online or in person, it just made me think of the fact that when I write the light rail, sometimes I don't remember which machine to swipe. So what are we doing to avoid administrative citations? Not saying that I've got on there because I couldn't figure it out. It just took me a few extra steps before I got on the light rail. What are we doing to avoid the citations for people who are trying to catch that train and they're trying to figure out which machine to swipe? I mean, we're varying, the colors of the uniforms for a certain reason. Can we do that with our payment machines, or can we put some signs up to say, to distinguish between the different types of machines?
Chair, Councilmember Chambliss, I think that is a fantastic idea. Color coding signage can really be an indicator for folks, so definitely we'll take that into account.
Well, yeah, and Chair, it's more about, preventing citations, much cheaper for everybody, I think. So, yeah.
Dr. Turner. Dr. Carter.
Either one works. I had a question. For people that are on public assistance, maybe your guys already have something like this, but I was just thinking if you could have a reduced fare card. So if I'm on public assistance, I can apply for that through maybe the local welfare agency or maybe directly to you guys. I verify my income, because then I'm only paying maybe a percentage of what the average person, whatever the average income is for the area, and then whatever my income level is, I pay a percentage that kind of keys into that. So my burden is proportionally the same as someone making the average income.
Chair and Dr. Carter, right now we do have a program in place. It doesn't tie proportionately to income, but it's called our TAP program, our Transit Assistance Program. And what it does is, I was just out at the Mall of America, we do tabling periodically in different places to get folks to sign up for this because it is such a great tool for individuals who have limited income. So basically folks will fill out a form, they'll show us a form of existing proof of income essentially. So if someone's on medical assistance or someone has EBT or a WIC card or things like that, there's a number of different kind of proof that we'll take. Then they are eligible, and then it's $1 a ride as opposed to the $2.25, $2.50 that it can be. So it's not quite proportional, but it is a reduced amount, and it takes a very short amount of time to get someone signed up, to get them registered, and I really feel like it's a great program. And it doesn't take a lot for them we're using existing programs to really get that income information and know that they're in need.
Yeah, the reason I brought that up because sometimes people don't pay because they can't pay it. They don't have it. I used to walk from where I lived at to downtown. I didn't mind it, but I didn't have the money when I was a kid, and I couldn't ask my parents, so there are a lot of people like that.
Chair, if I may too, I'll just mention, we're planning, it's not on the agenda yet, but this fall, Metro Transit is planning to bring a TAP overview to the council to talk more about this and some of the potential changes we're looking at making to increase utilization of it. So it's a really timely question, and just wanted you to know we are planning to bring something this fall to provide more of a grounding in that program and some opportunities we're seeing to maybe expand use of it, so.
That's really good news, because it is the best kept secret, I think,
Yeah.
in Metro area. Councilmember Johnson?
Well, and I just wanted to say, I think you had mentioned earlier too, with what I'm, our partners and the HAT team and with our new, team members that are coming on to help prevent fare evasion. I mean, that's the goal, is to get them the assistance they need. So I think you had mentioned that, which I think is great, because again, we're not looking to penalize people, we're just looking to get compliance, which is huge. Just one other quick question too, and it kind of goes back to, a couple of slides back on a different topic, but the QR code for the survey. Do we have a QR code up or something like that at all times that people can give us feedback all year long outside of doing a formal survey while they're sitting there? And, I know we have a complaint system that if they see something, there's a way that they can get, the situation or the issue into us for corrective action, but I'm just thinking as they're riding along at some point to just have some continuous feedback on how we're doing.
Yeah, Chair, Councilmember Johnson, to the best of my knowledge, and we don't have a standing open QR code, but I will say, as part of the presentation you'll hear next about cleaning and repair standards, some of the legislation is about making sure we're being really clear about how to provide immediate feedback to us. So it's something we're actively looking at, how to make that easier to do. Right now, you can call us, you can go online, but it's not quite as slick as having a standing QR code maybe. So it's something that we're actively thinking about, in part because of what Marilyn will talk about next.
Okay, so I don't want to get ahead.
No, it was a great segue.
I appreciate that, because there's an immediacy for people that are used to, if they have a smartphone, right? That okay, I've reported it and it gets to somebody right away, rather than kind of a 10-year ago process that we kind of initiate. So thank you I'll wait for the presentation on that.
Marilyn Porter, you've been very patient, and you do really important work. We're really interested. I know it's 6, but we want to hear what you've been doing.
I appreciate it. Chair and council members, Marilyn Porter, Director of Engineering and Facilities. So another aspect of the legislative action is cleaning and repair standards and reporting. So the legislation requires us to adopt standards and submit a report by October 1st of 2023. And those standards include cleaning requirements for station and vehicles, strategy for discovering and removing vandalism and graffiti, a proposal for timely repair of damage, and how we develop the standards and stakeholders consulted. Financial resources need to implement the standards, and as you just asked, we're also required to post notice on the council website at LRT and BRT stations by February 1st, 2024. And it's really about how we solicit that feedback. So we're really working through what that looks like. We're designing it as we speak, actually. We're also required to submit a report every 2 years, starting October 1st in 2025, and that's the frequency and type. So we really see this as an opportunity to enhance our existing cleaning and repair standards, and we also see this as an opportunity to partner with jurisdictions and also just our own internal partners within ENF, bus, rail, etc. So it's really it's really across all modes. So it's considered a great opportunity to do things better, if you will. So we're excited by it, actually.
Mr. Chair, if I can. And so I just have to say, I have downloaded and I have used on my app for the City of Plymouth. You hit the app, and it says, what is the issue? You get some categories. You have to type in very few things. You can upload a picture. They tell you they have it immediately, and they tell you when it'll be resolved. And I love this, because it's making it so much easier. You have more eyes and ears and advocates out there that really want and take pride in whatever it is they're seeing and monitoring. So I am excited to hear, you know, where you're going with this and the more engagement we can get from community. I just think it also, you get pride of ownership then in what you're talking about, the care that you want to give and the results you want to see. So that sounds exciting.
Thank you for the comment.
The last legislative provision I just want to mention for your awareness is the transportation bill included a requirement that we provide a transit safety and rider experience report to the legislature every year. The first one will be due on February 15th, 2024. It covers a wide array of topics, including data on crime statistics, looking at the impact that the Transit Rider Investment Program is having on what we're seeing on the system. It provides us an opportunity to provide recommendations for changing the new legislation. So just at this point wanted the council to be aware that we'll be working on that report and would bring it to you before we submit it to make sure you're fully aware of what we're sending forward to the legislature. This is really hard to read, but just to kind of give you a sense of our anticipated timeline, much of what you heard about tonight will be coming back to you to adopt and to further influence. So the purpose of tonight was really just to give you that broad look at all the legislation that we're in the process of standing up, but you will be hearing more from us and we'll be taking action on some of the items you heard about tonight. In our very last slide, I'll ask our Senior Communications Manager, Kerr, to come up and just say a few words about communications. I know, as we've talked about before, it's really important that we're doing this work and we're consistently moving the plan forward, but it's also important that we're showing our work and communicating to people the changes we're making. So Drew's going to say a few words about that.
Good afternoon, Chair and council members. Very, very few words. In fact, you could really leave it there, but I'm here today to remind you again that it's my job to tell our story, but it's also all of our jobs to tell our story. And so I continue to encourage this group and everybody, of course, that works with me at Metro Transit to be part of that effort. You have some examples just to highlight very quickly from the second quarter of this year. Of course, the June 1st kickoff of the Transit Service Intervention Project. I don't think we've had so many media in one place for many, many years now. And so glad that we had such interest in that and that has continued. We've got, even as we sat here this afternoon, stories published about the work that's being done on safety and security. So get out of here and go to the Star Tribune website and look for that. But we are, of course, also telling our own story. As much as the media is interested in this, we are also very keen on telling our own story in the way that we think that it needs to be told. We're doing that in a variety of ways. Of course, we have social media, and the chief is a presence on social media as well. If you haven't found him out online, do that. He's sharing good information on behalf of the police department, and we are hoping that the police department too will have its own social media presence in the not distant future. So I can get ahead of those questions by saying that. And of course, being out in the community, this is a little bit of outreach and a little bit of communications, but being out in the community in the ways that we are all of the time, in the ways you've seen and heard about tonight, including just this week, National Night Out. And we are looking forward to, as the chief said, the reopening of the South Tower at the Lake Street Midtown Station and celebrating that along with the community later this month. So there will be more information to share on those fronts. So, and again, the internal audience is as important as any other, and so we are also very active in that front. So employee town halls, we had a couple just this week, Monday, at East Metro and Nicollet Garages, and are making that a habit of being out as much as possible. And if you are looking for a place to send people to, metrotransit.org/public safety is the best place to find the latest information, including updates that you heard about today. So if you're not finding answers to questions you might have there, if there's more we can do to support you in the work that you're doing out there proselytizing, please let me know.
Excellent. That's so addressed.
Thank you. I think you do a great job. I follow you. I think before you even came to that council, I was following you. And then is this internal storytelling too? So all these updates to all the departments across the council get updates so everybody knows what's going on?
Chair and council members, yes. One of the primary vehicles that we utilize is internal newsletters, and this is a topic that is, if not every week, just about every week covered in that forum.
And then just one thing, so I see we're on threads. right? Unless it's somebody that's pretending to be us, but Metro Transit, MN, the official Fred's account of Metro Transit, but it's a private account, so you have to request to be part of it. Will that ever be public, and are we gonna populate that along with all of our other channels?
So Chair and council members, good question. This isn't a decision I would make alone. It's an interesting time in social media, as anybody who's followed the news is aware. So we are always evaluating, and especially right now, what are the channels that we need to be on? Where can we find people, and where can we have productive conversations? That last part is especially important in the era of social media. You know, that conversation is there, but how do we have a conversation that is positive and productive? That's where we want to be.
And Mr. Chair, I would just add, I think it's great, and I think right now if you're at least, so in our family, because a lot of us are in communications and social media, that's called Social Security, lock down your channels so nobody else can get them, and then you can roll them out when you need to. So I appreciate the work. And then to your point that you made too, I mean, we've got, of course, a lot of people that are in charge of communications here externally at the council and certainly internally as well. And then Terri, you know, sits, and I think that, you know, it's really important, you know, that we are aligned with Terri in this work, and I'm sure you're trying to do that internally as well, because we've got a lot of attention, rightfully so, on us right now, and I just want to put a good word in for all the people that are communicating, and at the end of the day, I think, you know, Terri's trying to really work on that big picture for everybody too, and make sure that we're getting the message across on the important stories that you guys are always working on.
Well, true, Lesley, Chief, Marilyn, thank you. You're pointing to somebody.
Oh, no, that's all right.
Oh, did you have something?
I have a quick comment if you don't mind.
Please.
I just want to say thank you, and I know he's probably going to go to this as well, but organizations always develop plans, but this isn't an actual action plan, and what we're seeing here is thoughtful consideration. Let's come up with stuff. We're going to finish it. We're going to follow it through. The other thing I want to kind of uplift up was a little bit what Councilor Lilligren was. Everyone who spoke tonight talked about customer experience and being people focused. And I can tell you, I've been out on the transit system. This is working. This is really making big differences, but I think it's that customer experience and people focused part of it that's doing it.
You could speak for me anytime. Those are great thoughts about the customer, and what you've presented was really impressive. So thank you. I know it's a continuing process. Thank you all for staying a little bit later, and these are both really important presentations. Really appreciate that work and that staying extra.